Welcome back to my channel. Today, with the release of Borat Subsequent Moviefilm, I first wanted to talk about the original film, 2006 Borat. Before we begin, let me know in the comments your thoughts on Borat, and make sure to give this a thumbs up if you like these reviews, because it helps me out immensely if you do that. Also, if you're new here and you like movies, whether it be blockbusters, hidden gems, or everything in between, please consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with reviews of new releases and some classics. But now, let's jump right into it. Sacha Baron Cohen stars as Borat, a reporter from Kazakhstan who heads to the United States to make a documentary. While at his hotel in New York, he catches an episode of Baywatch and develops an obsession with Pamela Anderson, having never heard of her before. And when he learns she lives in California, he sets out on a cross-country trip in hopes of marrying her. I remember this movie was all over the place when it was released. I was in high school at the time, and every day for the rest of the school year, I heard at least once a day someone doing their worst Borat impression, always saying very nice or high five. It was all people could talk about for a while, and it was everywhere I turned. Though while Borat blew up with this movie in 2006, this isn't the first on-screen appearance of the character. He regularly appeared in Cohen's series The Ali G Show a few years prior, which was pretty funny, though it never reached the popularity that this movie has. For those who aren't aware by this point, both the show and this movie setup would be Cohen going around in character interacting with unsuspecting people. If he interviewed someone, he would tell them it's for a real documentary, while he also secretly filmed interactions with random people he meets on the street. Besides Cohen himself, only a few other people were actually in on the joke, most notably Ken Davitan, who traveled around with Cohen, playing his producer Azamat. And because no one knew his true intentions, or in some cases weren't even aware they were on camera, this led to a ton of backlash from a lot of the people he filmed, with many of them even attempting to sue Cohen after the fact, although in all cases they were dismissed. In fact, I'm not even sure I can find one person who positively reacted to being filmed by Borat. But let's talk about those interactions, as those make up the majority of the film. Borat's quest to find Anderson is the one thing stringing all of the scenes together, and while most of these scenes do play into that actual story in some way, most of them can really stand on their own as vignettes of Cohen pranking people. And these interactions will range from somewhat harmless pranks to meetings where some truly grotesque stuff will happen. Because the character of Borat himself is racist, vulgar, breaks social norms, and most of the time doesn't listen when someone tells him that he's doing something wrong or offensive. And with a character like that in a normal movie, those are some horrifying traits of a lead character. And yeah, when he's talking to the camera or narrating and casually says some really offensive stuff to the audience, it's pretty uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable when I first saw it in 2006, and some of the things he says really haven't aged well now. But when he's interacting with unsuspecting people, that's where it really shines, because while Cohen's style of shock humor has received plenty of backlash, and not just with this movie, but with every project he's done that utilized that style after the fact, he has a reason for doing it. You'll have a few people who will try putting him in his place, but there are a lot of interactions where the unsuspecting people will go along with some of the offensive things he's saying. Because while Cohen mainly wants us to laugh, he also wants to point out how so many people, unfortunately, seriously believe the things this made-up character believes. Cohen portrays Borat's hometown as totally backwards in every way, which received its own backlash from the people being filmed. But he points out how there are so many people here who think of themselves as better, but actually are just as bad as the people in his hometown. But the difference between Borat and many of the people he interacts with are that while he's offensive in nearly every way, he's not malicious and doesn't fully realize when he's saying something wrong. Not that it excuses what he says, but whereas he's uninformed, the people he interacts with are way more informed than him, or are at least supposed to be, yet they still share these horrifying views. It's uncomfortable, but it's also satire, and part of satire involves pointing out uncomfortable truths and finding ways in which we can ridicule those truths. In this case, it's hilarious when Cohen exposes a lot of these people for just how terrible their views are and makes them look like fools on camera. Now, I'll admit, a few of these interactions haven't exactly aged well, and I'm mainly talking about the ones where he'll interact with people who actually try helping him break his social habits and don't actually say anything offensive, mainly because he still says demeaning things to them, and the conversation really ends up being unproductive. I think those are a few times where Cohen just punches down for the sake of it. But for the most part, this movie is very funny, and surprisingly holds up a lot better than I was expecting it to, especially given a lot of the things that are said and done here. There are a number of times where the pranks Cohen would play on people would be more physical gags or are somewhat harmless interactions, and those are ridiculous but elicit some very funny reactions. Some of my favorites include an early moment where he's sitting on a crowded subway in New York and unleashes a chicken on the crowd, which freaks everyone out. There's also a scene where he sits down with someone in an attempt to learn humor, and he attempts to tell a not joke, with the teacher getting frustrated but trying to stay composed. Plus, there's a scene where he goes on a local news show and after the interview interrupts the weatherman, who's cracking up as he's trying to get Borat to walk off screen. And for the most part, it leads to 84 minutes of hilarity. It's going to be shocking, it's going to be offensive, but at the same time, it's an absolute blast. Overall, Borat's very nice, and it still holds up well after 14 years. There are parts of it that haven't aged all that well, but for the most part, it still had me laughing out loud. While some of the more harmless pranks Cohen plays on people are great, this movie is at its best when he makes absolute fools of the people who share some of the horrible views that Borat has. It's a movie full of shock humor that surprisingly has a lot to say, and if you haven't checked it out by now, I highly recommend doing so. Borat gets an 8.5 out of 10. Stay tuned. Later today, I'll have my review out of the sequel, Borat Subsequent Moviefilm, which is honestly one of the last things I was expecting we'd get this year. But hopefully, it'll be another great success. So let me know, have you seen Borat, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Did you find it funny? Did you think it aged well after all these years? And what's your favorite Sacha Baron Cohen movie? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll catch you next time.